Hey, well, good afternoon, everyone, ladies and gentlemen. It's a great pleasure to be here. I'll dive right in. In January of 2019, I was aboard the research vessel Petrel with the director, Robert Kraft, who you've already heard a little bit about, finding the wrecks around the Philippines. And we were killing time in Iron Bottom Sound off of Guadalcanal. And he asked me what ship I would like to look at. And I said, well, I want to see the Laffy. And they send their remotely operated vehicle down. And the Laffy is the one that's in the bottom right-hand corner of the command cover slide for my command. After the ship has made a 20-foot closest point of approach in front of the bow of the Japanese battleship Herein, the officers on the bridge are firing their .45s at a battleship. She didn't last long after that, but on the other hand, the fire from Laffy after that close approach, the Japanese admiral didn't remember anything that happened after that. But while we were doing that, Rob Kraft asked me if I could find any ship in the world, what would you want? And I said, the Johnston. And he went, whoa, that's really deep. And I went, I know. The reason I picked the Johnston was because I wasn't exactly a normal kid in that I was reading Samuel L. Morrison's History of Naval Operations World War II in the second grade. And I was looking at the pictures before I could read. But you know, one of my childhood hero, other kids have sports heroes. Mine was Ernest Evans, who was the commander of the USS Johnston during the Battle of Samar. And one of my goals when I became the director of naval history in 2014 was to have the Secretary of the Navy name a destroyer after Ernest Evans. I was able to achieve that on, it's my job to recommend names to the Secretary. Last year, November, DDG 141 will be named the USS Ernest E. Evans. Now let's see if this is Admiral proof. Okay, yeah, okay. You know, the reason this battle meant so much to me and Ernest Evans meant so much to me is exactly what Morrison said about it. He said, in no engagement in the entire history of the United States Navy has we've shown more gallantry, guts, and gumption than in the 2 hours between 7:30 and 9:30 off the Battle of Samar. The guys on the Laffy might dispute that, but I think Morrison's assessment is basically correct. As we go through the battle, you will see this is truly an amazing action. Yeah, just to quick recap from the great presentations that come before. And by the way, let me give a shout out to combinedfleet.com. You want to know about Japanese stuff? That's where you go. But you know, in a nutshell, you have the one Japanese fleet carrier, 3 light carriers off to the north. Their mission is to decoy Admiral Halsey and the new carriers and new battleships up to the north. It works. Admiral Nishimura is coming in from the south through Surigao Strait with the 2 old battleships, Fuso and Yamashiro. His mission is to draw Admiral Admiral Kinkaid's 7th Fleet battleships, which are the old battleships, to the south to clear a path for the Central Force, which we just saw was getting beat up in the Sibuyan Sea, so that it could come through San Bernardino Strait and then around basically in the back door to Leyte Gulf, where theoretically General MacArthur's troop transports and supply ships should have been, easy pickings. In reality, the Japanese effort got off late because they got fooled by Admiral Halsey's operation north to Okinawa and Formosa, which you also heard about, which resulted in as many aircraft, maybe even more, shot down during that, Japanese aircraft, as during the Marianas Turkey shoot. with the result that those planes were, in the event that we went for the Philippines, those planes were supposed to reinforce the Philippines. They weren't there, so the Central Force has, no air cover while it's doing its thing. But basically, very complex Japanese plan. It works. And on the morning of the 25th of October, 4 Japanese battleships, 8 heavy cruisers, and 11 destroyers with 2 light cruisers. Let me see if I screwed that up. 6 heavy cruisers, 2 light cruisers, and 11 destroyers have come through the San Bernardino Strait, and they're coming down the east side of the Philippines on the island of Samar. And the only thing standing between them and MacArthur's invasion fleet is Taffy 3. Let's see if I include more on that. Taffy 3 is one of the 3 escort carrier groups that are assigned to the 7th Fleet, Admiral Kincaid's forces. Taffy 3 consists of 6 escort carriers, 3 destroyers, and 4 destroyer escorts. The escort carriers, what they have in common is that they're slow, only about 17 knots, carry about 25 aircraft, mix of FM2 Wildcats, which are, in this case, trained and armed to conduct ground support. And the other aircraft on these things are TBM Avengers, they're torpedo bombers, except in this case they're trained to do anti-submarine warfare protection of the force and ground attack with bombs. The point being is that none of them are actually trained and ready to go against a major Japanese surface force. The destroyers, by the way, are primarily armed with what they called at the time VT, variable time fuse, 5-inch anti-aircraft shells, actually radar proximity shells, i.e. they don't have any armor-piercing 12, not that that would do much good against heavy cruisers and battleships anyway, but that'll play a factor as we go. So the commander of Taffy 3 is Rear Admiral Clifton Ziggy Sprague, and they are in what they think is a backwater. They are aware of the strikes into the Cebuyan Sea. They're aware that a major battle took place around Surigao Strait. They're expecting to do routine operations supporting General MacArthur's forces ashore. And then things happen very quickly. In fact, the accounts is kind of hard to tell which happened first. The dawn patrol, if you will, went late, but the aircraft spots this Japanese force. Admiral Sprague and others are skeptical when he says it's, what it is. But basically, I can't really repeat what the guy said, but it's kind of like the entire blankety-blank Jap Navy. Almost at the same time, the radio men are hearing Japanese voices over the radio circuits. Lookouts are seeing anti-aircraft fire on the horizon, and the Japanese open up at very long range, and shells start falling among Taffy 3, all within the matter of a few minutes. Sprague's first reaction is not to go in the direct opposite direction as this Japanese force that's bearing down on him, but to turn into the wind and launch as many aircraft as he can get off the deck. Get these flying gasoline tanks, gas bombs off the deck. So some of these planes launch with almost no fuel and go right into the water. Some don't have enough fuel to get anywhere else. None of them have the right weapons to go against the surface force, and some of them have no weapons at all. And I'll describe how that happens, as we go. But it's really hard to see. The Japanese are coming from the north. Ziggy Sprague's Taffy 3 is toward the southeast. Further to the southeast is Taffy 2, just over the horizon. And again, Taffy 3 initially heads to the east into the wind and then turns to the south, which winds up putting the Japanese on a kind of an outside circle that is tactically advantageous to us. Admiral Kurita, who, as we already learned, had gone for a swim earlier, he's been awake for about 36 hours. His lookouts, who are normally extraordinarily capable, do him a disservice when they identify Taffy 3s as fleet carriers and cruisers. So he makes his first major tactical error because he thinks if they're fleet carriers, they're fast. So he unleashes his cruisers, general attack, go, everyone, Connie, Ollie, oxen free, everyone go. And he very quickly loses, control of the battle, because his cruiser that was sunk was configured for command and control, whereas the Yamato actually did not have, which is what he wound up on, didn't have the same communications capability as that cruiser did. So this is a depiction of the early parts of the battle where Taffy 3 is running away, making smoke, which turned out to be highly effective. What's wrong with this picture is that the Japanese were using various colored dyes. So it's actually a Technicolor extravaganza, reds, pinks, blues, all kinds of colors. Other than the Battle of the Komandorsky Islands in the Aleutians in 1943, this is the only daytime surface action. So, at night you don't see, colored dye. So this was highly, remarked upon by the people who, survived the battle. The ship that was closest to the oncoming Japanese was the destroyer USS Johnston, which was under the command of Ernest Evans. Ernest Evans was a survivor of the Battle of the Java Sea in 1942, which was a disaster. So he had felt the sting of defeat, and when he gained command of the Johnston, he was a commanding officer. He told his crew that I will never run from a fight. And he also said that, I intend to take this ship in harm's way, and anyone who doesn't want to go along had better get off now. And no one did. And on the morning of the 25th October, he was true to his word. When under his own initiative, he recognized that his force that he was charged with protecting, there's no way it's going to get away from this much faster Japanese force. So he has to do something. He's the first of the ships to start making smoke on his own initiative, and he's the first one to turn to actually attack the Japanese. And there are some paintings that make it look more dramatic than it actually was, but it actually pretty well. You have 4 battleships, a bunch of cruisers and destroyers all coming this way, and 1 destroyer going that way. The Japanese were taken aback a little bit because Americans don't do this suicidal run, because Japanese secondary armament is longer range than our torpedoes. So a daylight surface torpedo attack is like, you're not coming back. Johnston successfully, and Evans dodges Japanese shell fire. He gets close enough to the lead Japanese cruiser, the Kumano, he's credited with putting at least 1 torpedo into that ship, which blew the bow off. Torpedo may actually have come from a torpedo bomber, but it's hard to be sure. Regardless, after the Kumano is basically taken out of the battle, in transferring the flag officer off that ship to the Suzuya, he takes 2 heavy cruisers out of the battle. At that point, Johnston takes refuge in a rain squall, which is, they're intermittent all around. And by this time, Admiral Sprague realized the Japanese are still gaining, and he has to make what's probably one of the toughest decisions any commanding officer has to make, and that's he orders the Wolves, which are the 2 destroyers, to attack. Basically, he is ordering these 2 destroyers to certain death in an effort to buy time so they get more and more of his aircraft, off the deck. So Hull and Herein carry out their orders. The destroyer escort, Samuel B. Roberts, which is technically one of the little Wolves, the 4 destroyer escorts, he still has torpedo tubes on his ship, whereas the others had them removed to be replaced by anti-aircraft weapons. The commander of the Roberts, Robert Copeland, makes a decision that he's going to go in the attack with the 2 destroyers. And as he's going into the attack, he makes the 1MC public address announcement that probably no crew ever wants to hear, and that's, we are going into battle against overwhelming odds from which survival cannot be expected. We will do what damage we can. So these three ships, and at this point, by this time, damaged Johnston comes out of the rain squall to support the three destroyers that are going in. Two destroyers and one destroyer escort. For about the next hour and a half, it's a confusing melee. Trying to reconstruct it is practically impossible. There have been some really good attempts to do that. But you wind up with individual ship against ship actions, a number of cases destroyers versus battleships. In the smoke and the rain squalls and everything, we shoot at our own ships, Japanese shoot at their own ships, multiple near collisions throughout. You know, in the end, the Hull is the first one to get hit hard enough to go down. Samar Roberts eventually is hit hard enough to go down. The Herein miraculously survives, but is particularly effective in that she conducts basically a fake torpedo attack, which causes the Admiral Kurita's flagship, the Yamato, to turn in the opposite direction. You have torpedoes coming at you, you either want to go towards them or away from them. You know, if you go away is the safer approach because they might run out of gas before they get you. But it also took that ship out of the battle for crucial minutes during the time. And also Admiral Kurita, he's going the wrong direction from where the fight, you know, is. Johnston is actually the last one to go down. In the meantime, as the Japanese heavy cruisers are closing on the escort carriers, Johnston diverts their fire at one point, gets hit multiple times again. The Japanese destroyers are starting to close on the escort carriers, and Johnston again interferes with their torpedo attack, causes the Japanese destroyers to launch torpedoes too early. They run out of gas. So, you know, by this time, everyone is shooting at the Johnston. She's extremely badly damaged. Ernest Evans is very seriously wounded. The bridge is destroyed. He's on the stern of the ship, shouting steering orders down to after emergency steering, where they're basically manually steering the ship. By this time, the Japanese cruisers have scored enough hits on Taffy 3 so that the escort, Gambier Bay, takes the most damage, falls behind, and is eventually sunk, including by 18-inch shells by the Yamato. See, I may have skipped a few. Yeah, I should have been clicking the slides here while I was talking. This is the Samar Roberts, two 5-inch guns, you know, up against battleships. The Hull tends to not get the credit that she is due, but her heroism was every bit as great as the Johnston or the rest of them. She goes down. Their skipper, Kintberger, interesting fellow. He had about 7 commands during his career, of which I think the longest was about a month. He had just taken command of this ship, and his next ship gets clobbered by kamikazes off of Okinawa. This picture is kind of an artist's deception of what was going on during the height of the battle. It shows the Hull going past the sinking, you know, Johnston, which is a little bit out of order. But you get a little bit of sense of the Technicolor aspect to it. These, you know, huge battleship shells that are splashing around, you know, destroyers. What is happening is that our fire control systems are very, very good. So we're getting the better of any gunnery duels, and we're hitting these ships with 5-inch guns. But it's anti-aircraft shells. They're not going to penetrate anything. But what they're doing is they're decimating the anti-aircraft gunners that are topside on these Japanese ships. So although the Battle of Samar is often, you know, thought of as a surface action, it's probably the aircraft that did the most damage. The ones from Taffy 3, like I mentioned, they don't have the right weapons, but they're attacking, you know, anyway. And the ones who have no weapons are attacking anyway under the principle that if they're shooting at me, they're not shooting at the plane that does have weapons. So incredible heroism on the parts. The aircraft from Taffy 2 have enough time to start putting torpedoes on the Avengers. So the aircraft start taking a real toll on the Japanese forces. And by the time this thing is over, Admiral Kurita has lost 3 of the 6 heavy cruisers have been sunk. And almost his entire rest of the force is damaged in some way. But right at the point where the Japanese destroyers are once again closing in for a kill, cruisers that are left are closing in for a kill, it looks like Taffy 3 is doomed. Admiral Kurita issues a general recall. One, because he doesn't know what's happening anymore. He's lost control of battle. He got an erroneous report that they're actually, by this time he's figured out these aren't fleet carriers, but he got a report that there are fleet carriers to the north. So his idea, he's going to regroup and go after what turned out to be a spurious report. On board the U.S. ships at this point, like the lookout on Admiral Sprague's flagship, notices the Japanese, what they're doing. He goes, they're getting away. And Admiral Kurita's decision would go down as one of the most, before I get to that, as the Japanese forces are retreating, Johnston is still afloat, barely. And the Japanese destroyers are madder than hell. They're firing, round after round into the Johnston, basically helpless. But as Johnston goes down, one of the destroyer skippers, and we know which one, we know which name, and Parks may actually, have that. I lost, but anyway, he salutes the Johnston as it's going down because, the Johnston displayed a degree of bravery that the Japanese didn't think that the Americans were capable of, much to their, dismay, I guess, whatever. So Admiral Kurita's decision is probably the most second-guessed of the entire Pacific War. Might be a tie with the decision of Admiral Halsey to take everything up to the north. One of the underrated reasons for why Kurita made the decision he did was just how badly his force had been beat up by the escorts of Taffy 3. It was a very unequal contest, but our ships accounted themselves very, very well. The aircraft especially accounted themselves very well. But there's a couple other factors that aren't often considered, is that Kurita didn't really believe in the mission to begin with. The Japanese Navy had spent all the way since the Russo-Japanese War training for the decisive battleship on battleship engagement. And here he's given orders, do or die orders, to basically sacrifice everything that's left of the Japanese surface navy to sink a bunch of transports off of Leyte. For an island that before this happens, the Japanese army has decided they're not going to defend. They change their mind later on once we get bogged down in the mud. But Kurita understands the army's not going to defend Leyte. And once he gets in there, he knows he's never getting out. He knows, Halsey's carriers will get him, sooner or later, probably sooner. So he didn't believe in the mission. He also was one of the more humane of the Japanese commanders. Japanese Navy was actually pretty protective of human life, unlike the Army, which was quite wasteful of human life. Japanese Navy would go to great lengths to rescue their own sailors, often losing ships while they're trying to do it. And early in the war, off of Java, in the early part of the war, they would rescue large numbers of Allied sailors off of ships. That changed with the Doolittle raid, but that's a different story. But Kurita was actually one who did care about his men, and the idea of losing so many men on basically a mission that he considered to be a total waste, and it wouldn't have made any difference. Most of those transports were gone. The shelling would have been a real disaster, anyway, but had he gotten through, but not quite as bad as some of the accounts would make out. Like the troop ships were gone. So he gets pilloried for the rest of his life. for making that decision, even though, it saved many, many lives. So he retreats. Most of his forces are eventually run down and sunk, anyway later on. The commanding officer of the Roberts, survived the battle along with about half his crew. In his after-action report, he wrote that there was no higher honor than the privilege to serve with such a calm crew in the face of, overwhelming odds. There is no higher honor than the privilege to command a group like that. So that's a picture relatively late in the battle. It's showing kind of the end of Gambier Bay as she's being finally caught and sunk. Taffy 3's ordeal didn't end when Kurita retreated. About an hour later, they came under Kamikaze attack. The first Kamikaze attacks had occurred against Taffy 1 earlier in the day. So this wasn't the first Kamikaze attack, but these were the first two Kamikaze attacks of the war. Japanese aircraft that had been damaged and they didn't think they could make it back would occasionally crash into a U.S. ship. But these were the first intended to die Kamikaze attacks. All of the escort carriers that were remaining were either damaged by near misses. One of them was hit and badly damaged, and the St. Lo was hit and her damage was fatal. So she's the first major warship to be sunk by a kamikaze. I got 10 minutes, good. Excellent, it'll work perfectly. So anyway, another lesson on this one is 2 weeks before this battle, the St. Lo was actually the USS Midway. The Navy wanted to take that name for a much bigger aircraft carrier, but also proving the adage that changing the name of the ship once it's in commission is kind of bad luck. Guys on St. Lo would probably agree with that. The rescue attempt afterwards was a total botched job. For the same reasons that Kincaid and Halsey failed to guard San Bruno Strait also played into the rescue effort. So you don't know exactly how many, of about 1,700 sailors either went down with the ship or wound up swimming in the water. You don't know exactly what that mix is. Ultimately, almost 700 of them died. A lot of those who went into the water would have lived if they hadn't stayed in the water for almost 50 hours before they were rescued. And that was actually a pretty disgraceful action. So between the rescue effort that was botched and between the reason the battle took place in the first place, neither Kincaid nor Halsey had a big interest in making a big deal out of this battle. So it was kind of, lowballed for many, many years. Ernest Evans would get a posthumous Navy Cross, a posthumous Medal of Honor. All the other skippers would get a Navy Cross. I would argue there should have been more Medals of Honor. Taffy 3 would eventually get a Presidential Unit Citation. So let me skip forward here. 1986, the third Samar V. Roberts Harry-class frigate is commissioned. The skipper at the commissioning had a brass plaque made up that had the names of all the crewmen of the first Samar V. Roberts at the battle off Samar. FFG 58 in 1988 struck a mine in the Persian Gulf that had been laid by the Iranians. All the computer models said that ship should have sunk. But as the ship it's on fire, it's burning, in serious danger of sinking, the skipper told me that his crew would go past that plaque and they put their hands on it as if to gain inspiration from, you did your duty in 1944, we're going to do ours and we're going to save our ship. And they did. And when the commander of the Middle East Force called Skipper Wren and asked, are you considering abandoning ship? He said, absolutely no way. And then he gave his ship's motto, which was no higher honor. And let me close with the last hope I don't steal any of Park's thunder here, but this is Sam Ruby Roberts, which was found by Victor Vescovo, and Parks had a key role in doing that. It's the after 5-inch gun. And in that gun, they had 325 rounds of ammunition to fire at the Japanese. The 323rd round blew up inside the breech of the turret. Everyone in the turret was either killed or mortally wounded, except one who was blown over the side managed to survive. When the damage control party came forward, they found the turret captain, gunner's mate second class Paul Carr. He slit open from his throat to the groin. And he's standing up, trying to put that 325th round in the breech. They put him down, fill him full of morphine, go away. When they come back again, he's standing up again, still trying to put that round into the gun. So he was awarded a posthumous Silver Star for that action. I would probably say it should have been higher. But you know, anytime people start, especially in the Navy today, when people start whining about how hard things are and what we have to do nowadays, here's an example of, what was expected of these men during this battle compared to what's expected to us now. Well, maybe you've heard all about China and what they're doing, and the time may come, not too distant future, where once again courage is a difference between winning and losing. Not so, technology may not be the answer. So with that, I think I'm done. Thank you.